The string quartet was playing something delicate in the background, all violins and pretense. Outside the massive lodge windows, the Colorado mountains stood still like sentinels. The wedding had all the markings of a high society fairy tale. Floral arches, waiters gliding around with champagne flutes, guests in pastel gowns murmuring about hedge funds and art collectors. I stood near the stone hearth in the reception hall, watching my son Julian twirl his new bride around the polished floor. He looked proud, expensive, like someone who belonged here. I used to think I knew him. "Elaine," a voice purred behind me. I turned. Sienna, now my daughter-in-law, flanked by her mother and father. All three of them looked like they'd walked off the pages of a lifestyle magazine. Hair too shiny, teeth too white, eyes a little too amused. Sienna stepped forward, her smile sweet as poison. "We just wanted a quick word, now that things are official." Julian appeared beside them, straightening his cufflinks like he couldn't wait to get back to the spotlight. "It won't take long." I nodded politely, already knowing this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a declaration. Sienna leaned in slightly. "Now that we're all family, there's a tradition on my side. A family integration gift." Her tone was light, but her eyes were razor sharp. $50,000, nothing crazy, just something to show commitment. "Unity?" I blinked. "A gift?" Her father chimed in smoothly. "It's really just symbolic. A sign of goodwill." Julian didn't look at me. "It's not a demand. But if you can't keep up with where our life is headed, maybe a quiet place in one of those senior communities would suit you better anyway." I stared at him, my son, the boy I carried through a snowstorm with frozen hands and a bruised rib. The one who used to fall asleep curled beside me on a stained mattress in a Detroit studio apartment. That boy was gone. Sienna tilted her head, waiting for a reaction. I smiled, calm, collected, even graceful. Then I leaned in, voice low and even. "You forgot one thing," she blinked. "What's that?" I sipped my champagne. "I never bluff." And with that, I walked away. My heels clicked lightly on the floor, my spine straight, my face unreadable. But inside, I was steel. Because they thought today was the victory. They had no idea it was the beginning. That was 24 years ago. Back then, I was 28 and terrified. The night I left, Detroit was swallowed in a blizzard. The kind where the snow felt like needles and the wind made your teeth ache. Julian was 4, still small enough to carry, but old enough to understand something was wrong. I'd waited until the yelling turned to snoring. My husband, ex-husband now, though not yet on paper, had passed out face first on the couch, an empty bottle tipped over beside him. He'd spent the whole evening raging about a heating bill and how I was too stupid to read it right. But it wasn't the bruises that made me go. It was the way Julian stood in the hallway, quiet and still, watching it all happen, not crying, not moving. Just waiting for the storm to pass like he'd done it 1,000 times before. That stillness in a 4-year-old? That's what broke me. I packed a duffel bag with 1 change of clothes each, some granola bars, a jar of peanut butter, and $211 in crumpled bills I'd stashed inside a hollowed-out cookbook. I wrapped Julian in his thickest jacket and lifted him onto my hip. He didn't say a word until we were outside. "Where are we going, Mommy?" I could barely breathe through the wind. "Somewhere better." My cousin Tara hadn't spoken to me in 4 years, not since she loaned me money and never got it back. But when she opened her door that night, her face shifted from anger to alarm. "Jesus, Elaine," she whispered, pulling us in. "You look frozen." We stayed in her spare room for 4 nights. Julian curled up on a couch cushion on the floor, clutching a toy car Tara's son had outgrown. I cleaned up after everyone, cooked, kept my head down. Tara didn't ask questions. On the 5th morning, she left a post-it on the kitchen table that just said, "You gotta find your own place." Fair enough. I found a studio apartment above a liquor store. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the heat rattled like it was powered by ghosts. But the locks worked. That was enough. I got a janitor job cleaning an office building at 5 a.m. and a receptionist gig at a freight warehouse from 6 p.m. to midnight. I slept maybe 4 hours a day. I ate instant noodles and watered down Julian's milk so it would last the week. I used rolled-up socks to fill the holes in my boots. But one night I came home peeled off my sweat-soaked uniform, and found Julian asleep on our mattress, clutching my arm like a teddy bear. His breathing was soft, peaceful. I knelt beside him and brushed his hair back. We were safe, exhausted, broke, invisible, but safe. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Julian was 17 when the letter came. He burst through the door like a gust of wind, waving the envelope in his hand, cheeks flushed red from running. "Mom," he shouted, breathless. "I got in." I didn't have to ask. I saw the return address before he even opened it. University of Chicago, his first choice. His fingers shook as he tore it open. I stood in the kitchenette, still in my security uniform, clutching a dish towel like it was a lifeline. "Partial scholarship," he said, reading aloud. "They're offering $35,000 a year." He looked up at me, grinning. "Can you believe it? I'm going." I smiled so hard it hurt. I always believed it. We ordered cheap pizza that night, real cheese, not imitation, and watched a movie we'd both seen a dozen times. He talked about dorms and professors and majors. Logistics, he said. Systems. Efficiency. His voice was electric with dreams. I laughed at his jokes. I nodded at his plans. But later, when he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and cried. The scholarship was generous, but there was still a gap. Housing, books, food, the kind of incidentals that no one thinks about when they talk about getting in. I added up the numbers, then I looked at my savings. Not enough. Not even close. There was a small retirement account I'd been quietly building for the past decade. Nothing huge, but enough for a tiny, quiet future, maybe a paid-off trailer near a lake someday. Something still, something mine. I liquidated it the next day. The bank manager looked at me like I was making a mistake. I wasn't. Julian was my future. He always had been. 2 weeks later, I met up with Laura over cheap coffee at a strip mall diner. She'd been a friend since the Tara days. Now she did freelance contract work. Small businesses, startups, side hustles. Quietly, brilliant. "I need your help," I said. "I want to draw up a legal agreement. If Julian ever starts his own company, I want it in writing that I have a 51% share." Laura raised her eyebrows. "You think he will?" "I know he will." She didn't ask questions, just got to work. When I handed Julian the paperwork, he was hunched over his laptop, surrounded by coffee cups and college brochures. He skimmed the document quickly, eyebrows raised. "This is for that logistics platform I told you about?" he asked. I nodded. "Just in case it ever turns into something real. It's nothing binding, just future planning." He chuckled and signed without hesitation. "Sure, Mom, I trust you." Those words hit harder than he knew. I took the signed paper, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same hollowed-out cookbook I'd used to hide money all those years ago. It wasn't about owning him. It wasn't about control. It was about protection. Because love doesn't always come with a safety net, but sometimes you have to sew one anyway. It started in a dorm room with a laptop so old the fan screamed every time he opened more than 2 browser tabs. Julian called it the cockpit. He worked late, slept less, lived on vending machine snacks and cold brew. And still, he glowed. Every time we spoke, he talked about logistics, routing software, automated freight tracking, predictive scheduling. His eyes lit up like he was mapping the future. He moved into a shared office space downtown the summer after his sophomore year. I helped clean the place, hauled in folding chairs from a secondhand shop, scrubbed stains out of carpet squares with vinegar and baking soda because we couldn't afford shampoo or rental. At night, when the office was empty, I'd sweep the floors, take out the trash, and balance the books in a notebook that fit in my purse. I managed vendor contracts, caught accounting errors, made late-night calls to carriers who hadn't been paid. No one asked me to. I just did it. Julian always said thank you, but never with his full attention. He'd smile over his shoulder while typing an email, or say it offhand as he rushed to a meeting. His mind was elsewhere. I didn't mind. Not at first. By his senior year, the startup had 3 part-time interns, a polished pitch deck, and an early investor nibbling at the line. Julian still lived cheap, but the hunger in him had changed. It wasn't just ambition now. It was presentation. Image. Then the blog post hit. A niche tech site featured Julian under the headline, "The Grit Kid, How One College Founder is Revolutionizing Freight Tech." His face was on the banner, his story outlined in glowing detail. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My name wasn't in it. That didn't surprise me, but one line did. "I built this from scratch, just me, no safety net, no help." I was sitting on a folding chair in the back of the office when I read that. Alone. The mop bucket beside me still half full. I stared at the words until they stopped making sense. No help. I thought about the sleepless nights, the quiet jobs I'd worked, the retirement I'd given up. I thought about the cracked plastic binder in my purse that held the bookkeeping I'd done for him over the past 2 years. I thought about the hollowed-out cookbook still tucked in my kitchen cabinet, paper folded and safe. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I stood up, dumped the mop water, and walked out without saying a word. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hands folded over my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase. No help, not forgotten, erased. Her name was Sienna Caldwell. She entered Julian's life the way beautiful women enter rooms in old movies. Smooth, confident, with that soft, rehearsed laugh that made men want to lean closer. I met her for the first time at a local award gala Julian had been nominated for. Some Young Innovators of the Midwest event, with a plastic plaque and cocktail shrimp served in shot glasses. Sienna floated around the room like she owned it. Gold heels, a deep green silk dress, and perfect posture. Julian stood beside her with both hands in his pockets, and a look on his face like he'd already won. Everyone loved her. The mayor's wife said she was so polished. One of the investors called her a force. And Julian? He beamed like a kid who'd found a cheat code to success. I watched her charm the room with practiced ease, sipping wine and calling people by their first names, even if they'd only met seconds ago. When she spoke to me, her voice took on this thin sweetness, like she was auditioning for a role she didn't want to play. "So good to see you again, Mrs. Langford," she said, despite this being our first actual conversation. "It's just Elaine," I replied. She didn't blink. A week later, I saw their engagement in a photo spread for Midwest Founders Monthly. Glossy pages, candlelit smiles, a 2-carat diamond, and an artsy write-up about power coupling across industries. I hadn't received a phone call, no heads up, not even a text. Then came the email. It was short, brutal, and clearly not meant for me. From Sienna@Caldwell.group to Julian@Lantrix.io. Subject: Seating chart. Your mom can't sit at the investor tables. She'll embarrass us. Can you put her with the extended family? Or maybe have her at the back. PR needs this wedding to look clean. It took me a full minute to process it. I wasn't supposed to see that. Someone had forwarded it to the wrong Elaine, I guess. I didn't reply. I just read it again. And again. Embarrass us. A week later, I was at Julian's place, dropping off some boxes from the old office. He'd just signed a lease on a new headquarters, and I was still handling the final vendor payments. He wasn't home, but the door was unlocked. A binder sat open on the kitchen island, notes for an upcoming pitch to Sienna's father, a private equity executive with a history of turning family businesses into IPOs. I wasn't snooping, it was just there. A slide titled Reputation Strategy, Founder Identity Verse, Family Origins, bullet points underneath. Emphasize solo founder narrative, avoid public mention of early-stage funding sources, reframe majority shareholder as silent partner, remove maternal figure from visual brand assets, position Sienna. As the stabilizing influence behind growth, I sat down. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race, I just stared at it. At the careful phrasing, at the surgical way I'd been sliced out of his story while my financial sacrifice was being packaged and sold like a legacy. I thought about calling Laura right then. I didn't. I closed the binder, placed it exactly where I found it, and walked out the door, one thing suddenly crystal clear. They weren't trying to forget me. They were trying to erase me, on purpose. The day after I found the binder, I called Laura. She picked up on the second ring. "I've been waiting for this." We met that evening at her place. Tiny apartment, 4th floor walk-up, same coffee-stained table we'd sat at 10 years ago drafting Julian's startup agreement. She didn't waste time. As majority shareholder, you have options, she said, flipping open a folder. You can call for a formal audit. You can freeze non-essential spending. You can challenge the board on any misrepresentation in public filings. You can also, if provoked, reclaim operational control. Not pretty, but legal. I don't want to nuke the whole thing, I said. She nodded. Then we build the parachute before we board the plane. We spent the next 3 weeks quietly putting things in place. Laura created a fresh paper trail, authorizations, audit requests, proxy documentation. Everything tied back to my 51% share, still valid, still enforceable. We used an old phrase from a childhood storybook as our code. North wind. It was something Julian used to say when he wanted to escape scary bedtime stories. Call the north wind, Mommy. Blow it all away. That phrase would be my signal. If they crossed the line again, really crossed it, I'd send a one-word text. No dramatics, no confrontation, just quiet, legal teeth. In the meantime, I went back to my life. I worked the receptionist job I'd kept part-time, even after Julian started paying himself a founder's salary. I watered the plants on my windowsill. I made tea in the mornings. I waited. Then the wedding invitation arrived. It was thick, formal, gold-foiled. The kind of envelope you couldn't tear without scissors. Inside, the language was all curated elegance. An evening of unity. Families joining as one. Celebration of legacy. I scanned the names. Sienna Caldwell. Julian Langford. Caldwell family. Langford family. No mention of me. Not on the family line. Not as mother of the groom. Not even a line on the RSVP card to acknowledge my existence. Just a generic guest Elaine Langford, printed in small, careful font. My hand didn't shake. I didn't cry. I placed the envelope on the counter and poured myself a glass of water. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Laura. Final version of documents ready? Her reply came 10 seconds later. All prepped. One word and I'll deliver. Lai stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Good, not yet. Let's wait for the wind. Because I wasn't going to strike out of hurt. I wasn't going to strike out of pride. But if they made it clear, truly, undeniably clear, that they meant to erase me, then I would blow the whole thing wide open, quietly, legally, completely. The wedding was held at a private lodge tucked into the Colorado mountains, the kind of place that screamed exclusive in every detail. Valet parking only, champagne passed at the front steps, staff trained to whisper when they spoke. I wore a navy dress, simple, understated. No flashy jewelry. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of accusing me of making a scene. The guests mingled under chandeliers carved from antlers and crystal. A string quartet played something I couldn't name. Every table looked like a magazine spread. I stayed near the back, sipping a glass of champagne I hadn't asked for. Julian found me just before dinner. He didn't smile. Sienna was beside him, radiant in her custom gown, and trailing the same scent she always wore. White jasmine and expensive intentions. Elaine, she said smoothly, we were hoping to speak with you before the seating begins. I looked at her, then at Julian. He didn't meet my eyes. She launched into it like it was a casual favor. There's been a lot of investment interest this week, some high-profile guests. We need everything to go smoothly, no distractions. I took a slow sip. Distractions? She gave a tiny laugh, like I'd just misunderstood a recipe. We just thought it might be better for everyone if you kept a low profile. Julian finally spoke. We appreciate you being here, but things are different now. Sienna's family operates at a certain level. If it's too much for you, maybe a quieter life, somewhere peaceful. Might be more your style. I tilted my head. You mean an assisted living facility? He shrugged. Somewhere you can focus on yourself. Sienna smiled wider. We know this might be difficult to hear, but we want to offer you something, a parting gift of sorts. Her voice dropped a half octave, silky and sharp. $50,000. For a fresh start, for boundaries. It wasn't even an offer, it was a settlement, a check to disappear. They both stared at me, waiting for a thank you. Instead, I smiled, calm, easy, like this was all perfectly ordinary. And then I said it. You forgot one thing. Sienna blinked. Excuse me? I leaned in, my voice soft and pleasant. I never bluff. Then I turned away. graceful, measured, not rushed. I walked out of the main hall, past the hors d'oeuvres, past the waiter holding a tray of truffle sliders, and down the hallway to the side entrance. Once outside, I pulled out my phone. No shaking, no hesitation. I opened my messages. Laura, legal. Status, me. North wind. I hit send. And just like that, it began. Inside the reception, the guests clinked glasses and adjusted their cufflinks. 10 minutes later, the first courier arrived. Then a second. Then 3 more. Large white envelopes were handed directly to the wedding planner, the investment partners, and, most importantly, Sienna's parents. Formal legal notices, audit declarations, account freezes, documented evidence of misrepresentation. The string quartet faltered, mid-song. The head of the Caldwell Trust opened his envelope and turned pale. The photographer stopped snapping pictures. The PR agent stopped sipping champagne. And across the room, Julian's voice, once steady, once polished, cracked into confusion. The celebration didn't end with a scream. It unraveled with silence. They found me outside, standing near the rear terrace, overlooking the tree line where the sun had just started to dip. I was calm. The breeze was gentle. Behind me, the wedding had gone quiet. Julian's voice cut through the air like glass breaking. "What did you do?" I turned. He looked panicked. Tie loosened, color drained, hands twitching at his sides. Sienna was behind him, heels sinking into the grass, fury etched into every line of her perfect face. "You want to ruin everything?" Julian asked. "Over what? Pride?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked at him, like I was seeing my son for the first time in years. "Elaine," Sienna snapped, "you don't understand what you've done. You've created a legal mess. For what? Attention?" "No," I said softly. "For accountability." Julian stepped closer. "Undo it. Right now. Call off the audit. Release the accounts. You're the majority shareholder, yes, but this isn't just about you anymore. We're a brand. We're being watched." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the brand where I'm a silent partner?" "That was just positioning," he said quickly. "Marketing." I let the silence stretch. Let him squirm. Sienna's voice rose again. "You are nothing without his company. Do you understand that? No one knows who you are. You want to torch the whole thing over a bruised ego?" I tilted my head. "You should choose your words carefully, Sienna." "I'm not scared of you," she said, voice trembling now. "That's your mistake." Julian's voice cracked. "Please, you don't have to do this." I took a breath and finally said it. "You made your choice the moment you erased me, when you rewrote your story, when you said no help, no safety net. That was the moment you told me who you were." He looked down, swallowed hard. "I paid for your future with my past, and I never once asked for credit. Not when I was cleaning your office after night shifts. Not when I gave up my retirement. Not even when you pretended I didn't exist in front of people who only knew your name because of mine." Julian looked like he wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. Sienna opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm not here to argue, and I'm not here to take revenge." "Then what do you want?" Julian whispered. I looked at him. "To be done." He stared at me, like he couldn't process it, like he expected me to back down the way I always had. "I'll step away from the company," I said. "I don't want a seat at your table. I just want what I built to be honest and clean." "And if we don't fix this?" Sienna asked. I smiled. "Then the audit will finish what I started." They stood there, broken in different ways. Sienna's fury cracking under panic. Julian's pride caving in on itself. I turned. My heels clicked against the flagstone path as I walked away, the wind picking up gently behind me, not out of spite, but clarity. Because sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. I left the wedding alone. No speech, no scene. Just one quiet step at a time down the gravel path behind the lodge, the wind tugging gently at the hem of my dress. The sun was slipping behind the ridge, casting everything in gold. I kicked off my heels halfway down the slope. The ground was cold and uneven, but it felt good. Real, I hadn't felt the earth under my feet in years. A modest SUV waited at the bottom of the hill, parked just off the service road. Laura was leaning against the passenger door, a thermos in her hand and that familiar half-smile on her face. "Need a ride, ma'am?" she said softly. I smiled. Only if you've got good music. She opened the door. I've got Aretha and a playlist called Better Alone. Your kind of vibe. I slid into the seat, exhaled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt it. Lightness. We didn't talk much on the drive. No recap, no gossip. Just trees rushing past and the hum of the engine. That was enough. An hour later, we reached it. A small lakeside town just over the state line. Quiet, wide porches, wind chimes on every corner. We pulled up in front of a single-story building with big windows and a faded for-lease sign half-taped to the inside of the glass. I stepped out, feet back in my flats, heart suddenly fluttering like a bird testing new wings. The space was mine now. Paperwork signed, lease paid, the beginning of something that didn't exist for anyone else. Inside, it smelled like dust and old wood. But it was perfect. Big open counter, shelving along the wall, enough space for a few tables in front, and a little office tucked in the back. My shop. Not a boutique, not a cafe, just a place for quiet, intentional things. Handmade paper, journals, vintage fountain pens, a corner for books people actually read, space for people who wanted to sit and write and breathe. No networking, no branding, just stillness. I peeled the for-lease sign from the window, folded it neatly, and tossed it into the recycling bin near the door. The morning sun was rising over the lake now, light streaming through the glass like a quiet blessing. Laura stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with that soft look she rarely let anyone see. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. I'm not someone's mother right now, not someone's foundation, not a shareholder. I turned the key in the lock, opened the door wide. I'm just someone starting something new. Then I stepped inside, barefoot and smiling. The air cool and clear, the silence mine and mine alone, and it was enough.